Good evening. Our top story today, Baker Mayfield finally gets his deal, and there's just so much happening in free agency today. Hi, my name is Toomey. We have a lot of news to talk about today. The free agency tampering period officially begins tomorrow, and we're already starting to get news pouring in. I was so excited. You may notice the setup is a little different. That's because I'm standing up and I raised everything up. We can't be sitting today. We got to be locked in. There's news coming in, and I promise you, there's going to be something new that happens before the end of the show today. So, like I said, the free agency tampering period begins tomorrow at noon, and then officially free agency starts on March 13th at 4 p.m. But we're going to get so much information, like Baker Mayfield getting his new 3-year deal, Mac Jones getting traded out of New England, a ton of teams interested in Saquon Barkley. There's a little bit of news about Geno Smith that people are sleeping on. Kirk Cousins, we got to talk about Kirk Cousins on a daily basis because that's one of the biggest free agent quarterback pieces to fall. So we have all of that and so much more on Player Profiler today. Hi, everybody. Sorry, the phone is acting up. All right, my name is Toomey, and we're going to just start getting into it. I mean, we got to start with Baker Mayfield. So it's been officially reported as of 5 p.m. today, Eastern time, that he reached a 3-year deal with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for $100 million. So this was one of the biggest things that we needed to see all the other dominoes fall into place in the free agency market. Now, I do still think that Kirk Cousins is the biggest domino, but Baker Mayfield, there was some discussion about him potentially going to Atlanta, so that's officially been quashed, and he's going to be staying a Buccaneer. We really have to go back to the fact that he signed a 1-year prove-it deal, $4 million contract with the Buccaneers following the great Tom Brady, and he proceeded to have his best year yet, going for over 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, only 10 interceptions, getting a really critical, kind of dominant playoff win against the Eagles. And now he was able to cash in that production for a really large chunk of money. And it's one of those deals where it's really good, really great for Baker, but it's not a crippling deal for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers either. So here's how it's structured. So the new deal is worth $50 million in guarantees, which is solid. It's not 250 or whatever Deshaun got. You got $30 million in 2024, $30 million in 2025, $40 million in 2026, and there's an additional $5 million per year in incentives. So overall, the deal could be upwards towards like $115 million for 3 years. And there's clearly incentives, or there's clearly structure where if the team wants to get out of it, they can. So again, like I said, a really good deal for both sides. Baker gets paid what he deserves. Mike Evans, who just signed his deal a few weeks ago, clamoring for Baker to come back, gets his quarterback back. And if you're looking at this team, really until we hear anything about Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta, they are the clear-cut leader of that division. They've won it multiple years in a row. There's no reason to think that they're not going to do it again. Their offense, they really proved a lot of people wrong, including myself, about some of those offensive pieces. You got Mike Evans back. I think Chris Godwin is always going to be solid. I love Palmer. I think that he's ready to emerge. Rachaad White, no matter what I think about his breakaway ability, this man is super productive, and the way that they run their offense with how many screens they have, it really drives Baker's efficiency and also helps a player like Rachaad White really excel in what he does best, which is leading the league in passing, reception attempts. So I think that the Buccaneers are really set up in a really good way to have another great year. I think Mike Evans, it's hard to deny a guy who's just continuing to get 1,000-yard seasons. But if you're going to have Baker there, who's been really doing well this past year, throwing deep, I'm going to take a shot at Mike Evans. I really do think taking a shot on a Palmer, like I was mentioning late in your drafts, is a great strategy just to see what you can get. Baker, I'm not going to be tripping all over myself to go get Baker because, even though he was a QB 10 last year, per game, he was closer to QB 17. So I wouldn't be freaking out about it. But at the very least, you have some consistency in this offense in a relatively weak division, where I do think that if you're taking a shot on Anthony Richardson, making sure that he comes back from his injury, pairing him with Baker Mayfield late, I don't hate that type of strategy in your redraft leagues at all. And I think, again, I'm going for Rachaad White relatively early in my drafts because I do think having this consistent core here, and having them have basically every part of their offense the same from last year, except for Dave Canales, is going to be really solid. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I'm super impressed by their new offensive coordinator, but I will say I wasn't super impressed by Dave Canales last year. So I do think with all the offensive pieces being there, the offensive line only going to continue to get better. I think I like what I'm seeing from like a fantasy standpoint. So I'm really happy to see that Baker finally got his deal that he deserved. I mean, I live in the like Cleveland area, and even though maybe some fans think that like Cleveland and Ohio doesn't love Baker, we still really like Baker. We wanted to see him succeed. He brought Cleveland to the playoffs after a very long drought. So there's a lot of love for him up here. And I can speak for a lot of Ohioans when I say, we're really happy to see you get your deal, Baker. You deserve it. We're probably jealous from a weather standpoint because it's snowing pretty heavily up here, but you deserve it. Enjoy. I know him and his wife are doing a lot in the Tampa Bay area from like a charity standpoint. So I'm glad to see it. I think the fantasy implications are really solid. Like you're going to get some consistency from what you got last year. And he finally gets his deal that he so long deserved after being the number 1 overall pick and then kind of seeing your career almost fall apart when he went to Carolina to then come back and then win a playoff game in a dominant fashion, play really well in the Detroit Lions game too, and get him a 3-year, $100 million deal. Kudos to you, Baker. All right. So we have so much more to talk about. I'm definitely going to be getting into what's happening with Mac Jones, but I really wanted to talk about this new tool we have called data analysis. I'm going to let the Podfather take it from here for a quick break.
All right, I want to take a moment today to talk to you about data analysis. The data analysis tool, we listen to the users. What do you want? What do you need? And we made it happen. We added popular reports like a fantasy scoring report, air yards report. And if you want to create a new report, but you don't necessarily want to look through every field, we have quick results. Hey, show me the most popular passing data. Show me the most popular rushing data, fantasy data. Done. And the thing just is much faster than it's ever been. And the report builder got a lot easier. I mean, check this out. We break it down into offense, defense. Show me just fantasy data elements. And then when you get results, hey, show me by draft year. Let's take a look at just certain players that played a certain number of snaps or a certain number of games last year. This is the tool that so many of you have been asking for, plus a bunch of dream features that Billy wanted and Cody wanted and I wanted and Dario wanted. So go to the fantasy tools section, click on data analysis, or go to playerprofiler.com/data-analysis.
Thank you so much, Podfather. And we already got 27 people in here already. That's really dope. Every single person in here, like the video. Make sure you like the video. Do your part to make sure we keep giving you these great updates every single day. We go live with this every single day with the news on this channel. Obviously, on our main YouTube channel, we have videos galore. We have a podcast and a show for every single thing you're interested in from a fantasy football perspective. And we really only do it because of the support from you guys. So make sure the least you could do is subscribe and obviously like the video. So I appreciate it, guys. All right. Now I'm going to get off my soapbox. Let's get back into the news. So Mac Jones, the nightmare, at least in New England, for him is over. So he's been traded to Jacksonville Jaguars for what we're expecting to be. I've seen like varying reports, but expecting to be a 6th-round pick. So obviously not 15th overall. So, I mean, he's had a pretty dramatic fall from grace from 2021, where he had that really stellar rookie season. He made the Pro Bowl. I know there was so many people who decided not to go, but there was clearly a dramatic fall off from there from a skill perspective. I think a lot of things went wrong for him, especially from a coaching standpoint. Like they had a defensive coordinator calling his offensive plays, so they really didn't do him any favors. But I will say he's probably going to like the change of scenery because he's actually from Jacksonville, and so he gets to just take a lot of the pressure off and go play behind Trevor Lawrence. Now, while Trevor Lawrence does feel like an Iron Man of sorts, he got banged up so many times last year that I know as a fantasy community, we were so surprised to see him still play a game. So the fact that he only missed one game last year is kind of crazy, but he is not like the biggest guy. I mean, 6'6", but he's pretty frail. So there may be opportunities for Mac Jones to get on the field. And if he's able to impress in his little stints, that's going to lead to him potentially getting a deal later. So I think it's going to do him some good to just go home, relax, take all the pressure off of him and play in that type of environment. But also, if you're relying on the Jacksonville Jaguars from a fantasy standpoint, hopefully there won't be like a ridiculously large production fall off if Mac Jones does have to come in and play a couple of snaps here and there if Trevor Lawrence does get dinged up. Knock on wood that he doesn't. Apparently, there were a couple teams in the mix. I'm not sure exactly who they were, but apparently there were 4 teams. So I know there were some reports saying that no one was interested. Jacksonville was the only one that called. From what I understand, that's not true from according to Adam Schefter. So I do think that there was some interest in him, which makes me at least think like there's still something there. I think you could probably – I don't think Mac Jones obviously is not worth a first-round pick. But I do think to just completely write him off as a complete bust, it's a little too early for that. He's only been in the league for like 2 years. Like, I think this will be not the same as Baker, but a very similar type of test case to see like, hey, let's just take some of the pressure off, let him get a change of scenery. Same, go to Florida, see what happens, and maybe he'll get another deal down the line when he could be the leader of a team. But what I do think it does mean is for the Patriots, they had talked so much, or they're not talking at all, but there's been so many rumors about Jacoby Brissett potentially going to New England. I think the Jacoby Brissett and a high pick rookie it's almost like a certainty that's going to happen. I haven't heard anything else in the news, but there's a lot of rumblings about Jacoby Brissett. There's some rumblings about Drake May in particular because there seems to be some back and forth thing with Jaden Daniels and Drake May in the draft order of who's going to go second, who's going to go third. And there's also a lot of fans who are saying like they're going to just pick Marvin Harrison Jr. I personal opinion, not in the news, personally think that they're going to go Drake May, pair him with a Jacoby Brissett now that they have Mac Jones out of the building. All right, so let's move on. There's a lot of other quarterback news. I feel like I got to talk about every single time we come up here. We got to talk about Kirk Cousins. So it's another story from another person saying Jordan Stoltz of Bleacher Report saying that the Falcons are a major contender for signing QB Kirk Cousins. And I do think that it's possible that happens. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that happens during the show today. It seems like just the rumblings are getting louder and louder and louder for Kirk to go to Atlanta. So I still think the Buccaneers, at least right now, are the favorites in that division. It's going to be neck and neck if Kirk Cousins does go to that division. I'm not super impressed with his winning profile overall, like especially when it comes to like the postseason. But this will clearly be just a massive, massive, massive upgrade for that offense. And obviously what we care about here from a fantasy perspective, I think that's going to be lights out for those weapons. If you think about the offense that they're going into, which is going to be some permutation of the Sean McVay system with Zach Robinson there in offense, I think Bijan Robinson is going to get a ton of touches. I think Drake London is going to get a ton of targets. I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to add more receivers potentially in the draft, maybe even in free agency. I think Kyle Pitts, even though the way that the coach was talking about using him, not in line, but more of a traditional tight end, I still think that's going to be a lot of touches for him. And we saw the way that Kirk Cousins really heavily leaned on TJ Hawkinson last year. I think that there is some really solid upside for Kyle Pitts, and especially for those people who've been burned by him for the last 2 years. I think there's going to be great redraft value for him. And I also wouldn't be mad at trying to go acquire him in Dynasty if you could. So I think that this will be a really, really great situation if Kirk Cousins does go there. And I was thinking like Justin Fields was going to end up there, but just all the rumblings and all the noise, it just makes it seem like Kirk Cousins to the Falcons is almost fait accompli, especially with how Minnesota, there's been so much news about them being not put off by Kirk Cousins' ask, but they're struggling with his asking price right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if they let Kirk Cousins go to Atlanta and maybe they go get a Russell Wilson, who is not impressive. And I think Kirk Cousins is significantly better. But you could basically sign Russell Wilson for like a vet minimum. And because like the way that the deal is structured, Denver's just going to have to pay all the other money. So you're getting a really solid quarterback with the weapons you have for barely anything. I feel like that just seems like something that they'd be more willing to do instead of overpaying for Kirk Cousins for a marginally better player. Just go pay Russell Wilson dirt cheap, let Denver cover the rest of the bill, and then you could still have a relatively similar function offense. And I do think that's kind of like the best case scenario you could hope for if Kirk Cousins is not going to be there for your Justin Jeffersons, for your Jordan Addisons, when TJ Hawkinson comes back. I think that you really need there to be an established veteran quarterback if that's going to be the case, guys. All right. Next. All right. So there was I did not see this covered that much. And so this happened a little bit earlier in the week. And so I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about it. Okay. So Mike McDonald, he didn't seem to like commit to Geno Smith when he was asked when he was interviewing a radio station this week. So he was asked, have you made up your mind on who the starter is going to be at quarterback? Or is it going to be competitive? And the coach said, always, he said the team is always looking, always trying to figure out what's best for the team all the time, while adding they will try to make the best decision for the team. If Geno's your guy, you say Geno's your guy. And then the GM, he had said this earlier in the year that Geno Smith is the starting quarterback until he is not. Now, we got to tell you exactly what's happening with the quarterbacks. Those are the quotes directly from the coach, directly from the GM. They have a $26 million cap hit for Geno Smith this year. They're not cutting him. They're not getting rid of Geno. But what I do think is this, to me, that type of quote guarantees that they're going to be adding somebody, either I probably not in free agency, but basically they're going to draft somebody. To me, they're definitely drafting their future at quarterback in this year's draft. And obviously the biggest, it's the most obvious connection is Michael Penix. He gets to stay in Washington. His offensive coordinator is now the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks. He actually fits. Obviously he fits the scheme because he was just with the offensive coordinator, but with what Seattle wants to do, obviously running the ball, but like being able to go vertical, like he has the capability to do that. He is pretty old, and that's kind of the case with a couple of these quarterbacks like Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Penix. But sitting for a year behind a Geno, I don't think that's going to kill him, especially if quarterbacks are playing into their 40s like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. So I think that getting him into that system potentially in you jump into the back of the first round, maybe you get him at the top of the second round, but ideally you get him in the back of the first. I think that fit is too perfect that it's not going to happen, especially with these non-committal quotes from the front office of the Seattle Seahawks. All right, there's just so much news. I'm just reading it off. This is crazy. All right, so the Athletic's Ben Standing, he reports that there's been a couple of front office executives on the Washington Commanders that said they would consider trading Sam Howell at the very least for a fourth-round pick. So I think they're obviously just at least trying to improve on the fact that he was a fifth-round pick when he was drafted, and they would like to get a fourth if they were going to trade him. I'm not I don't think that this is going to happen. I would love for it to happen. I actually think that he would be the type of asset that maybe if they wanted to do a trade, they would kind of wait to see how the quarterback landscape shapes out. And for a team, maybe they get an injury, or maybe he's like next year's Josh Dobbs. He would be able to go into a team and just based on the way he plays, light up the scoreboard, even if he's not getting a ton of wins or anything like that. So I think that this would be super fun, but I think it's really highly likely that he returns. He may end up being the backup to his former backup in Drake May, or maybe he's going to be a backup for Jaden Daniels, whoever they pick at 2. But it seems pretty clear that they are picking a quarterback at 2. They're done with Sam Howell being a starter, but I honestly think it would make way more sense for them to keep Sam Howell, but he would have some value on the trade market if they wanted to get rid of him for a team who's desperate. All right, so I was starting to go from quarterbacks, then I'm going to go to running backs, and then we're going to go to wide receivers, and I'll round out with the big boys at the end, okay? Just making sure this thing just keeps glitching. All right, there we go. All right, so there's a little bit of Saquon news. There seems to be a lot of interest from a couple of different teams for Saquon. So the Chargers, Ravens, and Bears are believed to be serious suitors for Saquon Barkley. He's looking for close to a $10 million deal. That's close to the franchise tag. And there also is some interest, it doesn't seem to be as serious, but from the Eagles, Cowboys, and then there's a couple rumors still about the Texans wanting to go get him too. He could be a fit for any one of these teams. I wouldn't be surprised. I feel like the best place for him, honestly, is still Houston for me. But I think that he could fit any of those teams if he were to go there. I just think that, to me, I could be wrong. Honestly, I could be wrong within the next few minutes. I could be wrong tomorrow. But I would be so surprised if teams are jumping all over themselves to sign these veteran running backs. Not that this class of running backs coming out of the draft is super elite, but there's a lot of day 2 guys who I think you could plug and play as starters and be fine. And you won't have to pay them, obviously, anywhere close to $10 million. And especially because the veteran running backs available are all, I wouldn't consider them all over the hill, but they're very they're older. They're older running backs who are at that point where they're going to begin to break down immediately, like Eckler, Henry, Jacobs, Barkley. Pollard's not in that mix, but he's basically unproven based on what he did last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see way less deals than we're anticipating this week, and we see like more deals happen closer to or after the draft once teams start to figure out how they want to play with the younger fellas versus just signing these older vets and committing to them too prematurely. If anyone was going to sign quicker, though, it does feel like Saquon would be the guy to sign fast. But I wouldn't be surprised if players like Josh Jacobs or Derrick Henry are waiting a little longer than we expect. All right, so next, I think running backs. The only other thing, because this came late. So this came across literally seconds ago. And so I want to make sure that I'm continuing to check the news to make sure there's nothing new coming up that we need to talk about. So the reason why I still feel like Saquon is likely heading towards Houston, I just love the fit. I think in that offense, he's the slowest version of a CMC in this scheme. He would really fit it to a T. But then there was also some news that came out of Houston that said that Devin Singletary is not a lock to be on the roster next season. And this came from their local stations down there. So this would be really interesting if he was not on the roster next year. I actually think if Saquon's going to sign there, I would definitely want to keep it Devin Singletary, but I'm sure it's a money thing. But Singletary had a really good year last year. Like a lot of people expected him to have some level of work based on how Dameon Pierce played this first year. And I was definitely one of those guys predicting the Dameon Pierce fall off. But I wasn't expecting him to go for 1,000 yards again. He's done this in 3 straight seasons. He went for, it was 898 and 4 on the ground, and then 30 receptions and 193 in the air for another third straight 1,000-yard season. I do think Devin Singletary is a good back, but obviously Saquon Barkley, even at this point in his career, is a significant upgrade over Devin Singletary. And I wouldn't be surprised if that means that he's out the door because Saquon potentially goes down to Houston. There's a lot of people who want to see the Pollard to Houston situation, and I wouldn't hate that, but it does feel like Saquon with CJ in that offense is such an amazing fit, especially if they start targeting the running backs more. This just feels like a Saquon fit for sure to me. All right, there's 50-something people in here. Make sure you guys are liking the video, and make sure you guys are subscribing to Player Profiler on the news desk, and also subscribe to the Player Profiler main page on YouTube. We're going live with our news every single day. So you're going to have somebody in this time slot giving you the news of the day. And so if you're trying to make dynasty moves, if you're trying to just strategize for next year, this is the place to be because we're talking about all that stuff. So make sure you guys like the video. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. All right. Moving on. Let's go to our wideouts. So this also came across today. Guys, so much stuff happened today is crazy. And so much stuff is going to happen even after or during this video. It's nuts. But the Chargers are having some exploratory talks about potentially trading Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Now, it does seem like the likelihood of them trading one of the two is significantly higher for Mike Williams, but don't be surprised if both of them potentially get traded, and is 100% to do with the cap situation. I believe the Chargers are around like $20 million over the cap right now. And it was something crazy. Like so much of that is between 4 players of Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Bosa, and Khalil Mack. And so it does seem like Mike Williams potentially may be out the door. And I feel like they're likely going to keep Keenan Allen, but maybe they trade him too. I do think, and I was just trying to think about it. And I'm trying to think like where would Mike Williams go and where would he fit? Now his cap number is high. And so unless he restructures his deal for his next team, I wouldn't be surprised if it just has to be a team to me who has like a ton of cap space. So the ones that are like really jumping out to me who also have a need for a receiver would be the Bears, Detroit, and Arizona. And I actually I like all of those. I do think that also I actually like the Patriots as well. I feel like the Patriots to me would be a really good fit, especially if they go quarterback, not go Marvin Harrison Jr. with the first pick that they have. If they go Drake May, big arm quarterback who really has a lot of comparisons to Justin Herbert from a arm talent perspective, I don't think he's anything close to Justin Herbert overall, but from his arm talent and powerful it is, that's a perfect pairing for him to be able to cut through that New England wind and get a Mike Williams down the field. I think that is a perfect mix for a team who has so much cap space and who's likely going to be bringing in a new quarterback. So that's the fit that makes the most sense to me, but I actually don't think the Bears, Detroit, or Arizona are bad fits either. All right. Another one. So the Dolphins, they're intending to sign Jonnu Smith to a 2-year contract. And I mentioned this, I think it was a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago on this show, that if Jonnu Smith signs with the Dolphins, do not sleep on Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith has the potential to go crazy in this offense. Now, I'm not saying draft. I mean, I'm probably not drafting him in my first 10 plus rounds in a 12-team league and redraft at all. But there's just such a heavy touchdown role for the tight end in this offense. We didn't see it last year, but I think the tight ends last year were just, I'm not going to be rude, they're not that great. The tight ends in the offense last year were not that great. But McDaniels really wants to utilize that position in this scheme. And we saw what happened with Gesicki when he led the team in touchdowns and red zone targets the year before. I do think that Jonnu Smith does profile more similarly to the Gesicki than obviously he does with Durham Smythe. And so I feel like for a team who has really dominant targets on the outside, you got running backs who can catch the ball, you're going to see so much open space for Jonnu Smith. Now, I don't think he's going to be like an every week starter. I wouldn't mind him in best ball if you're super desperate as like your last pick. But there's definitely going to be a stretch of this season. I'm calling it now. There's going to be like 5 to 6 weeks where like, man, why is Jonnu Smith like a top 6 tight end? And it's just going to be because of scheme and maybe injuries, and he's just getting open because he's super athletic. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has like 7 touchdowns sneakily next year. So mark the tape. Calling it Jonnu Smith going to be a sleeper, but again, don't go crazy trying to draft him in your top 10 rounds. I don't think he's worth that. All right. I think I'm kind of really rapidly moving through the news. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that was of note, because at the end of this, I wanted to go through like my top skill predictions where I think in free agency they're going to land. And then we could just check the tape and see if I'm super right or super wrong next week at 7 when I'm back on. But the last thing I wanted to talk about, I think Mike Thomas, he's likely going to get released. That's not surprising. The Saints are in cap hell. They're restructuring everybody. That's another guy. I don't know if he's going to sign anywhere immediately unless he's taking a significant pay cut. But that's one of those players who I wouldn't be surprised goes to a contender like Detroit or Kansas City. But again, he'd have to go at like a really cheap deal. And the last thing I wanted to round out, I just wanted to go over some of the big boys deals. Not as much fantasy related, but just really important news. So Chris Jones, 5-year extension through 2028. He's the highest paid defensive tackle in history. 5-year, $95 million deal. So I think he's above, obviously he's above Aaron Donald now. I think he's right below Nick Bosa on a per year basis. He's so impactful on a down by down basis. Even though I think Aaron Donald is a better player overall, he's clearly had way more impact when it counts in the playoff run. So much deserved. There's some rumors that they may be trading Snead, but I think that Chris Jones is the bedrock of that defense. So no matter what happens around him, as long as you keep Chris Jones, you have the shot to have an amazing defense again. Next, another great defensive tackle, all pro player typically. Fletcher Cox, he called it a career. So he's retiring after 12 seasons in the NFL. So he's going to be joining his center, Jason Kelsey, and they're both going to be going out the door. This is going to open some things up for the rest of that defense, but you got to tip your hat to such an amazing player who's been dominant, Super Bowl champion, made it to the Super Bowl again the year before. Like, he is a solid leader in that locker room. And while Philly's defense fell apart, I do think getting some of the younger players in is going to help them, but you can't replace a Fletcher Cox and what he means to that defense. So hats off to you. Great career, Fletcher Cox. And then last one for the big boys, I think Teron Armstead, he was actually considering retiring, but it looks like he's going to reach a deal with the Miami Dolphins to return in 2024. That is one of those players, like, and during the fantasy season, you're going to see us talk about, I talk about nose tackles all the time, and I talk about tackles all the time, especially the ones that are super impactful, like a Trent Williams and like a Teron Armstead. He's not Trent Williams to me, but in this offense, he is critically important, when he is on and off the field. When he's off the field, Tua experiences a significant amount more pressure. The offense just does not run the same. So them not having Teron Armstead was actually going to be a big deal unless they plan to move up and get one of these awesome left tackles in the draft. So the fact that he's returning is really, really pivotal for any of the fantasy pieces in that offense. So it's glad to see that Teron Armstead is going to return. All right, and the last thing before we get out of here, again, I'm going to go over my top skill player predictions in free agency, and let's just keep a tally and see how many are terribly wrong, how many are off, and how many I get right. But before I do that, make sure every person in here, there's 55 plus people in here, make sure you guys like this video. Make sure you guys subscribe. We really, really appreciate you guys hopping in here. And if there are certain things you guys want us to talk about, make sure you leave a comment and let us know what you want to see us talk about the next day. Because, again, this is an every single day show. I'm on Sundays, but we have one of our experts every single day going over the fantasy news and the football news of the day. So just make sure you guys are tapping in, subscribing, so that every time we go live, every time we have a video, you are notified. And make sure that you subscribe to Player Profiler, the news desk, but also subscribe to Player Profiler's main YouTube channel as well, because anything you need in fantasy, we supply it. Like every single need you have in dynasty, superflex dynasty, you need help on like a rookie, like superflex startup or anything of that sort. We got everything for you. So make sure you guys are tapped in. All right. So here are my top predictions, and I'll talk very high level for each one. I've already talked about Kirk Cousins. I think he's going to the Falcons. I think it's just the money's too high for Minnesota based on what they've said, and there's cheaper options out there. And this kind of leads me to the next one. I'm going to go Russell Wilson to Minnesota. Again, they could give him a vet minimum deal, and he could sign there and still make that offense pretty productive. I also wouldn't be surprised if he does end up with the Steelers again, because of like he's going to cost so little. But I feel like Minnesota, just based on the other options available, I don't think there's any way that Minnesota is going to successfully trade with the Bears in division for Justin Fields. So that's why I think it's like he's going to go to Minnesota. Justin Field, likely maybe he goes to the Steelers. I think that would actually be a really good fit. He gets some confidence back with the Mike Tomlin coaching the team. But also, to me, that's another player who may fit with the Raiders. I do think the Raiders are likely going to draft a player, but if they didn't, Justin Fields and Antonio Pierce, I feel like he's the type of players coach who is going to say, hey, F the trend, I'm going to buck the trend. I'm going to go get Justin Fields. I don't care if he's not a traditional passer. We're going to just run the ball like crazy anyway, and I'm just going to force him into my system. So I like the Steelers, but I definitely like the Raiders for Justin Fields too. Next, Derrick Henry. I do think like they almost had a deal done last year, and the ownership of the Titans nixed it. I do think he's going to end up with the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes a little bit to get this done. I wouldn't be surprised they draft another running back and sign Derrick Henry. But yeah, I think Derrick Henry to the Ravens makes sense. Saquon Barkley, I already mentioned. I feel like Houston, maybe this is more hope than anything, but I just feel like that's such a great fit schematically. I would just love to see, even though it does feel like the rumors there are, I guess the news there is more rumors than anything. I just kind of want to see it. Excuse me. Next, Austin Eckler. There's obviously a chance that he returns to the Chargers. I do think if he does return to the Chargers, he will be used truly as a satellite back to whoever they draft, because I definitely think they're going to be drafting like a first and second down player. But if he doesn't stay with the Chargers, wouldn't be surprised if he ended up in Denver. Like, I do think that there's opportunity for him to go back home to Colorado. So I don't hate that. And because of that, I do think it's possible that the person who goes to the Chargers is either going to, I actually think Tony Pollard. I feel like Tony Pollard is going to go to the Chargers, and they're going to draft a rookie who's going to be the more first and second down back. And Tony Pollard is going to be used closer to like a satellite back, closer to what he was used like with Zeke Elliott there. So what I'm basically predicting is Chargers are going to be drafting a first and second down running back, and it's either going to be Austin Eckler or Tony Pollard who's going to be spelling them. That's what I think. And I also think that the Chargers are going to run the ball like crazy anyway. So there's going to be some value there, just not as high as we drafted these guys last year, obviously. I think Josh Jacobs, to me, I love his fit in Dallas. I really think that would make a ton of sense. Again, that's another team who could draft a running back, but it just seems like I feel like they're going to just be enamored with a Josh Jacobs. I don't know why. I have no rationale. So I just feel like it's going to happen. Mike Williams already said it. I feel like the Patriots are going to be taking Drake May, because just it feels like the board is really changing around right now. And if the Patriots take Drake May, I feel like the perfect fit for the way that Drake May plays is a Mike Williams, is just a deep ball threat who can get up and hopefully stays healthy the full season. But I do like the combination of Drake May and Mike Williams. And then Brandon Ayuk, who I feel like is just completely slept on. This is just a hope. This is hoping against hope thing. I said it for Mike Evans before he signed last week, but I'd love to see Brandon Ayuk with Amon-Ra St. Brown. They do very, very different things. They are both technicians from like a receiving standpoint. A very tenacious blocker, so he'll fit into that tenacity of that team. Like, I would love to see Brandon Ayuk there. Now, I still think he's going to be competing for targets, obviously, with an Amon-Ra, and it'd be kind of crazy to give these two guys a deal to save offseason. So as I'm talking through it, I'm probably convincing myself this is not going to happen. But hey, this is what I hope is going to happen. So I'm going to just use it to say that's what I want. So Brandon Ayuk to Detroit. Make it happen. Let's go. All right, guys, I think that's all I had for today. If there was any other news that I missed, please let us know. Just write in the comments. All the people in here who are watching live, we really appreciate you guys. Make sure every single one of you guys like the video and every single one of you guys subscribe, because we go live every single day with the news of the day on this channel. And obviously on the main channel, Player Profiler on YouTube, we have content for you for days, and there's live podcasts happening all the time. So make sure you guys tap in. If you want to win your leagues, this is the place to be. Have a good day, guys. I'll see you later. Take care.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.